You're listening to Prosper in the Kingdom, the podcast where faith meets practical strategies to help you become healthy, wealthy, and wise. Join hosts Jon Cleaver and Wendy Lee as they share insights to equip you in your journey toward abundance, spiritually, financially, and beyond. Just a reminder, every situation is unique. The content of this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as specific financial or medical advice.
Doing a cabbage patch, bringing it back. Hello, everybody. Jon Cleaver here with the ever awesome Wendy Lee for another exciting episode of Prosper in the Kingdom. And we've got some fun stuff to talk about today, Wendy. I like it.
We do.
What are we talking about?
Okay, we're talking about the big, beautiful bill.
The big, beautiful. I know. I want to say big, bad breakfast. For those of you not around the Middle Tennessee or Lower Tennessee area, there's a breakfast shop. I don't know if it's elsewhere, but called Big Bad Beautiful Breakfast or something like that. I don't know, but they have Big Bad Breakfast. Yeah, they have the best breakfast, but that's not what we're talking about. We're actually talking about the Trump administration and their big, beautiful bill. What does it do? You've got some people really excited about this. I know I am to some degree. And then you've got some people just losing their mind because we've got to cut stuff to pay for it. What are you talking about? Yeah, we're going to talk about what it is, what it isn't, some of the pros and cons and how it impacts you. And bottom line, is it a win for the middle class, which is what we're going to see here. So yeah, let's dive in. When do you want to kick us off? Do you want me to kick us off or how do you want to?
I can kick us off.
Let's do it.
So yeah, I mean, the first thing is like you said, there's pros and cons and there's, depending on who you are, you're going to amplify certain aspects of it. But we're going to try and give you a full rundown of, who it's good for and who it's not. But the first thing is the tax benefits. There are, for middle-class America, especially people that have a business or that are in real estate investing, or that work for tips or work overtime, like major tax benefits. So
huge. Yeah. It's huge for your hourly people, which is a lot of us out in middle class. Huge for the tip oriented industry, specifically servers. We did an episode last week on tipping, what that's evolved or devolved into. But if you haven't caught that, go catch that episode. But yeah, this is that to me is a big win. So keep going. Yeah. Keep going.
Locked in lower income tax brackets. Up to a couple of the highlights, up to $25,000 deduction on cash tips. So service workers, right? Up to $12,500 in deductions on overtime income, which is awesome. I know a lot of people that do shift work and things like that. Like overtime is part of what they count on. And the fact that they're going to save on that tax for that overtime is awesome. And I think it's going to encourage people to work more, right? It's not like, hey, I'm working, getting overtime and taxed even more because they're, typical higher income on overtime hours. More deductions for Social Security income, for auto loan interest. There's more, I don't fully understand SALT caps, but basically, one guy I was listening to says it helps eliminate essentially property taxes by increasing the deduction to $40,000. So every dollar spent can now be a write-off towards income taxes for your property taxes. So that's awesome. Different things like, two things I really like is you can now take up to $5,000 a year as parents, put in a savings account for your kiddos, and that becomes a write-off for your income. So up to $5,000 a year in a savings account for your kids, which I think is cool. Another thing about kids is the 529 plans. You can now take tax-free withdrawals for homeschooling up to $10,000 per year per kid. So it used to be, right, 529s you can't touch except for college. And so Trump's saying, hey, some people want to be able to homeschool their kids, or I don't know if this applies to private school, as well. I'm not sure about that, but
Yeah.
and then one other thing. Sorry, I had my notes over here. I guess
Well,
that
while
was
you're looking,
yeah.
okay, looking at the savings account for your kids, I see that getting abused unless they put some strict guidelines on it and guardrails. That's one of the things, like the 529 plan. That's a formal arrangement. You've got to set it up with a third party, investment house or whatnot. But I'm going to go down to my local bank and I put $5,000 in my kid's savings account. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, until the boat comes on sale, right? So and I'm sure there'll be some parameters and some regulation around that. But no, I think anything that the government can do to create a savings mindset, I still think we should start with changing the school curriculum in public schools to include personal finance as a mandatory requirement. Rather than just trying to fix the problem down the road. But what do I know? So looking at the overall bill, I think it's a big win. I mean, my big concern is, there's a cost to it. There are some cuts being made, and cuts being changed, but kind of looking at that, you've got to pay for it, but it's still net in true government fashion, which kind of surprised me a little bit coming from Trump. As far as just adding a bunch of expenses, you look at, there's going to be some cuts, and this is where the left is really freaking out, to Medicaid, right? You've got $1 trillion in cuts being made to Medicaid over 10 years, but that's still a significant number. Now, there's a lot of Medicaid fraud going on. And I think there was a big announcement this week where $14 billion in fraud was discovered through a group of people. I forget where they were operating out of, and hopefully they bury them under the jail because you're basically stealing from people who really need those benefits. But you've got work requirements as well. Now, that's something, depending on the situation, I am kind of a supporter of that, for the simple fact that if you're able to do something to contribute, even if it's volunteering, or acting as some kind of a coach or something. It doesn't have, I'm not talking about physical labor where you're swinging a hammer building roads like the FDR New Deal, right? But if you're able to contribute, you should be able to contribute, right? And you should be, if your kids are over 14, do you really need to sit at home, and just collect Medicaid? So there's that. Reductions in SNAP, child care support, and clean energy credits. The SNAP and child care support, I've got to assume there's some guide rails. And again, that's what the left is really freaking out about. But let's face it, folks, America is struggling from a fiscal financial perspective as the, working class, right? We need to make some cuts. We can't just keep spending. If you and I, we had an income of, say, $70,000 a year and we were spending $90,000 a year, guess what? We'd have to find some ways to cut. The U.S. government's no different, right? Now, where I think a lot of it, and this is where, ever since the whole East Coast, West Coast thing between Trump and Elon has gone down, we haven't really heard a lot of Doge, but I loved what they were doing, and I hope they get that back on track where they're finding the cuts and making the fixes. But again, that's kind of a scary thought, right?
Well, and I think there's some misconceptions out there too. Like I saw people, online saying, I have special needs kids at home to take care of, and now I'm going to have to go back to work. And there are provisions in that bill that say, like, if you have kids under, if your kids are younger, under 14, or if you are taking care of people that are like unable to take care of themselves, like fully disabled. Okay. It doesn't mean but doesn't mean your kid, is functional with autism or whatever, but like truly like you have to provide full-time care, then there's exceptions for that. And so many people are kind of like the abortion, right? That old debate of, but the like 0.01% that had this whatever situation, those are not the common thing. So with this, the Medicaid is not, those cuts are not going to affect, it really not intended to affect the families that truly need it. And it's really I mean, I sent you a reel the other day of this kid who was filming his mom saying, you're not going to get a job. You're going to mess with my housing. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to get my benefits from the government. It's better for us not to work. And that's what I think we're trying to shift is like,
Yeah, that's where the intent is. Yeah. Yeah.
You got to do your part.
And I see zero problems with that. Now, one of the things, going back to the clean energy credits and stuff like that, I got zero problem with that. I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, don't get me wrong. I was a Cub Scout leader, a Boy Scout leader, and the whole leave no trace behind. I'm a full fervent believer of that, leave it better than you found it and things like that. And not everybody's like that. We know that there's, the big companies and stuff like that abuse that. And that's why we've got the EPA. But, giving people credits, and it cracks me up. You see these big, famous people. I'm not going to name any names. I was about to drop some names, but they talk about all this stuff about, carbon credits and da-da-da-da-da. And they're preaching to you from their private jet as they fly over to Paris for lunch. Right. Give me a break. Right. Let's just be real and just own it. It is baloney. It's baloney. We'll go with baloney. There was another word I was going to say, but yeah. This is family friendly. So looking at that, it's one of the things that I don't have any problems with that. But the concern I do have, and I think it's needed, but I think we kind of put the cart before the horse kind of thing with regards to how are we going to pay for all of this. I mean, this is going to add about 2.8 to 3.4 trillion to the national debt. And, we've got to figure that part out. We can't keep spending more than we're bringing in. We've got to get more of a balance. And that's, again, going back to Doge, why I love what they were doing, because they were finding a lot of the problems. And then I like, the fraud that was just discovered in Medicare, right? Or excuse me, Medicaid, Medicare. Those are the things that we need to be going after. But we need to not just discover them and, not do anything about it. Those people need to be penalized, persecuted, not that we'll ever see that money again, but send a message out there. But kind of boiling it all down, the pros and cons. I mean, bottom line, it's a big tax savings for the working class.
Right.
I don't care if you like Trump. I don't care if you love Trump. I don't care if you hate Trump. Bottom line, your bottom line as a worker, as a middle-class person, as a middle-class family is going to be better, especially those that work overtime, those that work tips, like we talked about. Your life just got a lot better. Okay. You're now going to be able to keep a lot more of your money. You're incented to work more, and not work more to pay more taxes, work more to keep more money in your own coffers. Business owners, you're going to get to keep more of your profits now. And I'm not talking big business owners for the people that, on the left, it's a big corporation. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking for the mom and pop shops, the local businesses that you should be shopping at, helping those families and things like that. They're going to be able to keep more of their money as well. And rewards for the hustle over the handouts. But bottom line, you're going to get a bigger bang for the buck. And we all know people. You go out to YouTube, for example, we're on YouTube. You go out to YouTube, there are educational videos out there of all types, including how to game the system, how to, maximize government benefits and stuff like that, how to play that game, much like the lady you were just talking about in the video. And whether you want to admit it or not, folks, it's out there. It happens. And that's what they're trying to go after and cut. They're not trying to go after the single mom with the child with autism and make her go back to work.
Right.
That's not what's going on. So let's be real about it. Let's be adults about it. And let's recognize what's going on. I'm going on a rant there. So what are some of the things you see? Any cons that you see on this?
Yeah. I mean, so I do want to mention the whole, you said rewards over handouts. It's biblical, you guys, that you should not be a sloth, right? Lazy hands, like the Bible is very clear that you should not be lazy, that you should work, that you should contribute. And so I think that this bill is going to de-incentivize people to abuse the system. Okay. But I do believe there's still protections for those that truly need it. And if not, that's where I would encourage the local church and Christians to step up, because it's the church, not the government, that's supposed to be taking care of the widows and those in poverty. It's the church's responsibility. Church need to step it up. Anyway, cons though is, the cuts, especially for low income families and elderly. Like, there are cuts that are probably going to be felt, there are going to be side effects to the changes that are maybe unintended consequences. Increasing the national debt is, hopefully we make up for that in other ways. And then there's also long-term risk because of that, of inflation, interest rate hikes, and things like that. But a lot of people will see it as a downside, that there's less federal support for food and childcare and those clean energy efforts. So
yeah. Well, one of the things too, you look at cutting, where can we make cuts to actually cover the cost of this stuff? And, this is kind of a sidebar conversation, and I'm probably going to ruffle some feathers on my right side of the equation, right? But, looking at it's $3 trillion over 10 years is what this is going to add, right? We look at, could we trim defense? And I know everybody kind of, whoa, especially on the conservative side of trimming defense. But if you look at how much we actually spend in the United States for defense, you take China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Germany, all these big countries, you add them all together, we still spend more than all of them combined. And if you were to take a 10% cut to that, right, run more efficiently, but a 10% cut to the defense budget, we're still going to outspend all of them combined. And so, you look at that, it's like, okay, is there some opportunity here? And that's really there. And that's really the question I pose. And I think the answer is yes. I'd love to hear your comments, below, and don't come at me on the attack. Just come at it from a mathematical standpoint. You look at duplication in federal government, right? There's a lot of agencies out there that, let's be honest, quite frankly, they all do the same things. And I'm not talking like, oh, these two do the same thing and that's the one up. No, there's like 150. If you do the research on it, there's 150 organizations that help with basically the same thing. Do we really need all that? Obviously that's going to mean job cuts in the government and things like that, but we all know the government's bloated. And, how do you stream like that? Again, that's why I was a big fan of Doge. They're going in and looking where we can save money and put that back into the people, basically. Stopping fraud and improper payments. I think that's happening now. I love that the Department of Justice is going after that, especially since they solved the Epstein case. No, nothing to see here, folks. Move along. Sorry, I had to add that in there. That's a major disappointment for me. I'll just shut up now. But you look at going after the fraud and things like that, and it's rampant in the United States. The people that are working the system, gaming the system, or whatever. And, looking at selling off the federal properties, cutting the corporate handouts and things like that. Looking at some of the money we're sending overseas. I know that's been kind of a subject people have been talking about, but, why are we the police of the United States? Now, I will tell you this. Trump just got a big win with NATO, and he got, basically the majority of countries to commit to 5% of their GDP towards towards defense, right? And so that's going to allow the United States to kind of pull back a little bit. My hopes are that they're going to reroute those funds somewhere else to help support our infrastructure internally in the United States. But I'm going on a side note here, but there's a lot of different ways we could pay this without just slapping on, printing more money, and just kind of running off the hip. So my hopes are that they're going to take a closer look at that. But bottom line, what does this mean for your family? Well, again, looking at it from a Christian perspective, if you're working in the middle class, if you're working, in hourly overtime, it's a net win. Okay. It's a net win on taxes. It's a net win on your income ability, your earning ability. It's going to give you some breathing room on top of, we've seen prices go down at the grocery store, the gas station and things like that. So at least in the short run, this is a huge win. Now, who knows what happens with the next election? Because it seems like politicians only want to talk about that person's evil. So everything they did, let's get rid of it. But you and I in the middle class are the people who suffer. But, don't get into, thinking that everything's great, we've still got to figure out that debt piece. Again, it's a little bit of kicking the can down the road, but net, it's a win for the working class. And I'm a big supporter of it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. I mean, I think especially, you and I are, in, businesses, small businesses. And I would say if you have a business, an LLC, an S Corp, small business, make sure you get with your financial professionals and figure out how you can leverage some of these tax breaks that are offered, get with the right people. And then, overall, I think there's a lot of good in it. We didn't touch, I don't really know about the AI piece of that bill. Some people are in uproar about that. That would be another episode. But
I wanted to stick to the financial side, that's going to impact you and I and the rest of the working force out there. But, here's the thing. I mean, this is great and I love it, but it's only good until the next election, right? So figure it out. But take this time to really kind of dive deep, pay down your debt, right? Get that monkey off your back, boost your emergency funds, right? You're making more money. Don't turn around and go and spend it, because guess what? There may be another storm, and there probably is another storm on the horizon. So boost your emergency fund, invest for your future. And I'm not just talking about for retirement, invest in wealth, figure it out. If you don't have somebody, we'll help you, get with us. Go to the link. I'll put it in the description below, but go to that link, fill out a form, and we'll have one of our professionals get with you and actually build out a financial plan for you. Protect your income, protect your family, protect your legacy, right? That's this window of opportunity that's put in front of you. So don't squander it. So, again, it's like Proverbs 27:23, know well the condition of your flocks. So know what's going on and get your financial house in order. You've been given a window of opportunity on both the income side, the tax side, and everything else. So take full advantage of it. And with that, we're going to close out. So again, thanks everybody for being here. Sorry, I went on a little bit of a rant, but don't forget to go to safemoneyroadmap.com, get your free financial plan. And do not leave this video without clicking a like, and make sure you're subscribed to get all the latest and greatest updates from our YouTube. And also, we're on multiple podcast channels, so catch us while you're driving. And if this added value or you have a topic you want to hear, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know, and we'll talk to you again. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to Prosper in the Kingdom. If this episode added value to your day, be sure to like and subscribe. And don't forget to share it with someone who could use the encouragement. For more resources, head to prosperinthekingdom.com. Let's continue building lives of purpose and abundance, one step at a time.